Welcome to this edition of Partners for Community Living. I'm your host, Judy Leasure. If this is the first time you've joined us for our program, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back on a beautiful fall afternoon. And I think we have a program that's going to be very uplifting and enlightening, and certainly give me a chance to learn more about some friends that I've known for a long time, but I'll get to know them in another aspect of their lives. And I'm very pleased that we're going to welcome two authors to our program. Before they were authors, I knew them as professionals in the field of developmental disabilities. And I think before we start talking about the book and the wonderful stories in that book and let you know how this book is available, we will go to each of our panel members and have them give you some background so that it'll give us a fuller understanding of how these stories developed and the level and depth of expertise that they bring to the stories and to the book that they've co-authored together. My first panelist is Ken Routson, and seated next to him is Nancy Reeder, RN. And we've worked for many, many years ago, together. So we have a lot of stories we could share. Oh, yes. Wonderful, funny, and really uplifting stories as well. Ken, why don't we start with you, and you give us some background on your professional, your advocacy, your vocation that led up to the time that we are going to talk about your book.
Okay. I was born with severe learning disabilities, and in fact I went to special ed classes for speech therapy. Went to a regular class the rest of the time. I did that until about the 4th grade, and it's ironic because during my career, much of my career, I was paid to speak from workshops and seminars. And recently, though, because a thing called aging, which we're here to talk about, along with other types of brain challenges like in autism, I couldn't really articulate a lot of what I was going to say throughout my life because of the severe learning disabilities. And recently, since I have now, I'm part of the 60s Club, and I find out my learning disabilities are more pronounced now. So it takes me a while. So I'm sort of limiting my speaking engagements and decided to write more. So I'm really writing articles, and of course we're here to talk about our book, The Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's. And as far as a lot of the philosophies that we talk about in this book, I implemented when I was executive director of a residential agency. And we would take only people with severe behaviors or medical issues that no one else would take because of the severity of the behaviors. And just using common sense, the power of love, establishing positive rapport, cultivating atmospheres of trust and safety. It's very important that the people we work with feels very safe and valued. And it was amazing just using those common sense approaches that we had a reduction of behaviors, and in some cases actually eliminated some of the behaviors.
And Nancy, you want to give some of your background?
Okay. Background, first of all, wife, mother, and I have to get the grandma thing in.
Definitely.
Two beautiful young granddaughters. Professional history, it's kind of a blend between medical and disability issues. Started out as a psychiatric nurse and went on as a visiting nurse with Children's Services, and then went into family practice and did some work in senior care facilities, and also taught as an adjunct professor at the local universities. And I have about 35 years of disability services with both adults and children. And have worked as a consultant with Ken for many, many years. We've known each other. Volunteer with Partners for Community Living, and also I'm a Ohio Reads tutor for first graders at my girls' school, and work with the children's programs at the library. So it's kind of very checkered past there.
Checkered path. And I believe in your time in working with the county program
Right.
with developmental disabilities, that ranged from very young to adults, correct?
Yes, yes.
And you want to talk a little bit about those programs?
Okay. Well, I started out with the County Board of Developmental Disabilities, 1980, I believe, 100 years ago, as a facility nurse in what they termed as a sheltered workshop. And worked there for 8 years, left there, went to start up a federal mandated program bringing disability services down to infant and toddlers. So started that up in Montgomery County as a federal flow dollars came through for that, and worked in that for 14 years. And I believe around 14 years. So I have both ends. I started out with adults, and then I went to the very, infant toddlers.
And both of you seen innumerable changes
Oh, yes.
over these decades, I know.
And some things
For the
coming.
good.
Yeah.
For the good.
Mostly for the
and
good.
Mostly
Yeah.
for the good, and
Yes.
still need to keep going. And I
Yes.
think
Be
that's
vigilant,
one
yeah.
message that we are going to talk about in your book. And
Yeah.
I'll hold this up for a minute. This is, I don't know how much we'll see, but it's The Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's. It's stories of unconditional love and self-determination. And I'm going to ask you a few times throughout the program, tell us how people can get a hold of the book. So if they've got a chance to go get a piece of paper and a notepad or something, they can write it down. So tell us first how they get the book, and then we're going to start talking about how this whole process came about, and the two of you joining up to do this, and talk about the book itself. So how do we get The Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's?
Okay, the website is giftsofautismandalzheimers.com, or they can get it off of Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Kindle. It's now on Kindle, so if you're one of those electronical people that prefers electronics, they can get it off of Kindle.
And I must say that it's a very readable book and very, very fast-paced book, but yet at the same time it's educational, but one of those that you can't help but relate to the stories in and everything. So, and I can see and feel your years of experience in everything we do. I want to start off by reading just a very short part of the introduction to the book, and then we're going to talk some more about it. And this is by a young man named Ron Kaufman, and I'm going to have you tell me about him a little more, but he says this about the book. Once you read this book, you will never be able to unread it. And trust me, that's a good thing. It's a good thing because it means that you will never be able to see only one side of autism, Alzheimer's, and many other seemingly tragic diagnoses and conditions. You will no longer be able to sustain the idea that these challenges can only be seen as unmitigated hardships and unsolvable conundrums. You'll have a difficult time maintaining the feelings of hopelessness so deeply embedded in our culture. You won't view fear or sadness as the only human responses to having a loved one diagnosed with autism or Alzheimer's. And it will no longer be possible for you to be able to look at someone you care about with neurological challenges and simultaneously think to yourself, there's nothing I can do to meaningfully impact my loved one's condition. And hopefully we are going to talk about Ron too, because he was a young man with autism. But my curiosity when I first heard about the book and I first saw the title was, I think what a lot, and what he noted in some of his communication within the book too, is why would anyone talk about the gifts of autism and Alzheimer's when the first reaction to anybody is
How
is
could it
that
be?
sadness
Right.
or
Yeah.
why us, or you know, how did this happen to us or something.
Right.
So where you're doing this, what stage did that title come? Was it there from the beginning, or how did you get to the gifts of autism and Alzheimer's?
I think I'm going to defer to Ken because in his journey with his mother, you know, the gifts that he, you know, got from that journey, you know, and I know the gifts that I have received in working with folks with disabilities, but he has definitely experienced it firsthand, you know, Alzheimer's with his mother and the wonderful gifts that he came. So Ken, would you?
Yeah, before I do that though, why don't you mention about the gifts part? We're not saying it's a gifts.
Right, right, yes. When you look at gifts, you know, the first thing is say, well, how could this possibly, as you said, be a gift? But we have found through gathering our journeys and stories with folks that what they're saying is what you might perceive as a tragedy, and I think that they have learned so much. They have become appreciative of the day-to-day interactions with people and not take things for granted. They've learned to love differently, but still love intensely. Patience, you know, they've learned to think outside the box because you cannot, you know, just stay, I mean, because of the things that are presented to you. Also, a sense of humor. And I tell you, if you don't have one with these conditions, you know, you need to develop whatever you can with a sense of humor. So with each individual, it's, you know, if you come to that point where you can start to see, well, maybe there are some things that I have learned and appreciate, you know, that maybe those are considered gifts. And that's what the folks with the journeys in our book have told us, and they were wonderful stories.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ken, before you talk, we're going to have you talk about specifically Alzheimer's and your mother's story, because it's such a poignant story and so certainly such a personal one to you. How do we clarify and not perhaps make any misconceptions that we're talking that autism and Alzheimer's are the same thing? We need to make that distinction that there's two very different diagnoses and the two very different approaches to them and everything.
Alzheimer's is a broken brain trying to be normal. Autism is a normal brain trying to connect better. With autism, you have the two hemispheres in the brain growing at different paces. And once a child's brain grows to its full potential, even after that, the two hemispheres, they have trouble with their neuronal synapses as far as communicating. But the brain is normal. Alzheimer's, and both of them, a lot of the characteristics are very similar as far as cognitive, communication, language, motor skills. It affects all of those areas, but the primary difference with the autism versus the Alzheimer's is with the Alzheimer's you have the hippocampus where the memory is located in the brain, and you have a deteriorating hippocampus. In fact, research has showed that cortisol, the stress hormone, actually shrinks the hippocampus. And in autopsies, they found very prevalent amounts of inflammation in cortisol in both autism and Alzheimer's. As far as the gifts, with my mom, what inspired the book was when I was working with my mom and taking care of her with Alzheimer's, I had to go through a loss of my mom that I grew up with, and I didn't see any gifts then. I went through all the stages of loss that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross refers to in her death work, as far as the books Death and Dying that she's written. So I went through the loss, but after and we're not saying it's a gift to the parents and caretakers, especially before they really start to really accept and make peace with. Once I made peace with the loss of my former mom, I had a really neat journey, a spiritual journey, a magical journey, because I discovered a whole new mom. She was nothing, the old mom was very controlling, worried a lot, took life serious, whereas the new mom was childlike. She saw everything fresh and new. One of the gifts that I first identified and first appreciated was being in the moment. Average people spend millions and billions of dollars going to mindfulness classes or in the moment, learning to be in the moment, whereas so many people with autism I've worked with, they get fascinated. And my mom, Leslie, my wife, and I would take her for rides on weekends, and she would spend 45 minutes looking at clouds and talking about how beautiful they were. We would pass just simple walls that we'd passed 30 or some years. She would say, "Oh, look at that, isn't that beautiful?" And one time we were at Hills and Dales Park. She looked around, she said, "You took me to California." And she just got so excited, and she wasn't a touchy-feely person before the Alzheimer's, but she really became tactile, and she would just sit and just massage your arms, and it's fascinating with the oxytocin, the love hormone, is why so many older people love music, and they like art, and they like theater, because those are hardwired. Leslie and I, my wife and I, went to see Glenn Campbell in concert, and this was on his goodbye tour. And although he would stumble and couldn't remember what song they just sang or would sing, as soon as he started playing, he did not miss a beat.
And he's been diagnosed with,
yes,
with Alzheimer's.
yes.
Right.
And he's now in some sort of care facility. But it just, it's very fascinating once you join their world. And in a little bit, when we talk about Ron Kaufman, I'll talk a little bit about the coincidence with him in my life.
So did your mother understand the diagnosis of Alzheimer's? Did you go through that part of the journey with her, or?
She always worried about getting Alzheimer's. She worried, like I said, she was a worrier, and I think that's where I get my worrying from. But she worried, and I used to say to her, "Mom, if you had Alzheimer's, you wouldn't even know it. You wouldn't be worried about it. So no, Mom, you don't have Alzheimer's, or you wouldn't be worried about it." And sure enough, when she started to exhibit the Alzheimer's, like she'd hide her purse and she'd lose things, and it's like at first, I think at Sundowners, the only time we had trouble with Mom was during Sundowners. She would think it was time to go to work. She worked at Miami Valley and thought she needed to get dressed. But other than that, whenever she was with Leslie and I, we did not have any problems, except for when she lived in a nursing home, or what do they call it, before you get there, a nursing home.
Okay, independent,
yeah,
semi-independent living, yes, some care. But
yeah, she wouldn't have behaviors until we took her back. And that's when I discovered a lot of similarities with the people with autism. When I was executive director of the agency I was telling you, where we take people with severe behaviors. Our field, that the three of us were so privileged to be a part of, the field of developmental disabilities, we are so much further ahead and advanced than the geriatric community. They're just now talking about person-centered planning and person-centered. But one time I walked in a nursing home when my mom was having a behavior. She had a doll baby that she really thought was real, and that was her lifeline. She would sing to it, she'd rock it to sleep, she would try to feed it, and she'd say to Leslie, she'd say, "Wow, it's such a good baby, it never cries." Anyway, I walked in to this nursing home where she was transferred from the more independent living and into assisted living was what I was trying to think of, assisted living home. She broke her hip, and I walked in, and the one nurse had told the direct care worker to take the baby away because she wouldn't take her medicine. My mom never said a curse word before the Alzheimer's. She was cussing, she was kicking at them and trying to bite them, and I was thinking, wow, this is the reason I became executive director and started a residential component to the agency I worked with, because I got frustrated, even in our field, when a lot of the professionals were wanting to use behavior mod to control people or try to make them fit into our world without us trying to understand them and kind of like build a bridge to communicate with them to find out, you know, some of their issues, like all the sensory issues that we later discovered, the professionals discovered a lot of these sensory sensitivities with people with autism. So that's when I really saw the need for geriatric facilities to learn this concept that I've presented workshops on, behaviorist language. When someone is having a behavior, whether or not they have autism or Alzheimer's, it's communication. You have to kind of decipher what that language, it's either a request they're making or something they're feeling or a statement that they're making.
And that requires more of you than just following a prescription or following a plan for somebody or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
It requires you to meet
Yes.
them.
And the
Yeah.
power of love. I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
say that enough. It's all about love. Because it's really common sense kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And not to put so much of the academic on it and
Yes,
trying to
yes.
understand it. You talked a little bit about sundowning. Can you just give us a little bit of a definition of what
I think
that
how
is?
how it's got its name, and Nancy's the nurse, and she might be able to give a more medical precise definition. But I believe, Nancy, it's probably because it happens at sundown usually, and
Right,
they get
circadian
disoriented.
rhythms
Yeah.
and things, they get somewhat disoriented and things are changing. You know, it's like there are many suicides are committed very early in the morning, you know, at that time. It's a change in your body rhythms. And I think with Alzheimer's that, you know, that happens around, you know, when those changes start to occur. We were talking about the baby. I can remember working nursing home, and we had a lady, she'd get so agitated, and she keeps crying, "My baby, my baby, my baby." And I didn't have any doll baby, you know, I didn't have anything there. So I would roll up a towel and put that into her arms, and she would just calm right down. You know, it's that maternal instinct that giving her, I mean, you know, I mean, it was a beautiful moment when I could do that for her. And, you know, she just, I mean, to see the transition like your mom, I mean, it's very real to them. Yeah, very real. And, you know, it was a privilege to be able to do that for somebody.
And it's redirecting, and it's all in your approach.
Yeah.
And just because, you know, people with Alzheimer's are affected with the sundowners, whatever's going on organically or biologically, it's redirecting in your approach.
Right.
And that is something that, you know, a lot of people just aren't gentle people that work, unfortunately, in both fields of autism and Alzheimer's. but just the approach is so important.
And it seems like it would be a different approach and a different mindset for caretakers or family members as well, especially. You found that, but I don't know if other sons and other daughters or nieces or nephews or brothers and sisters would understand that. What message do you want to tell those has a family member now that's starting to deal with Alzheimer's, and about how to embrace that and, you know, accept in the moment and, you know, let go of that, it has to be this way, or they're not thinking like I am.
Exactly.
So.
You got to make peace with what is. That's the first thing that they have to do. The other thing I highly recommend, we researched you know, hundreds of books, and I interviewed lots of families, but it was I'm Still Here by John Zeisel, the best book out of all the books that I read. The other book is very fascinating, The Myths of Alzheimer's, and it's a MD, one of the internationally recognized experts on Alzheimer's, wrote a really great endorsement in back of our book. But yeah, his book, The Myths of Alzheimer's, is the other one. But what I would recommend is for them not to take their loved ones and put them off in a nursing home. There's so many, especially nursing home staff and assisted living staff, that said so many residents were just put there, and their children or husbands or wives said, they're no longer that person that I knew, and I would rather remember them like they were. And just those, unfortunately, they left those lovely people by themselves, and they were missing out, the family, because there's just so many neat things that you can find out about that new person that's about to come into their lives, if they allow it. And you have to sort of enter their world. Did you want me to mention something about Ron Kaufman?
Well, and I would think that letting go of the person that you love has got to be...
Making peace with that loss, going through that loss, because it is a loss.
Yes.
It is a very...
Like you said, the grieving of that. You have to get through that grieving before you can move to that. Yeah, if you and Nancy could talk about Ron, we've talked, you know, from your personal experience about Alzheimer's, but Ron was a young child with autism. So first of all, how did you tell us, because I know there's a TV show involved, so give us that background and how you located him and how you were able to get him involved in the book, and then the story that he tells in the book.
Okay. I'm going, Ron, you had closer contact with him than I did and more interaction. Before we do that, I had an experience this summer. We went to visit some friends in New York, and we've known them for 25 years, and Kenny has latter stage Alzheimer's, and it came to the point where his wife and family just had to seek outside services because it was just not maintaining him at home anymore. And anyway, this was a county-run institution or home in New York. And I went in there, and I've been in a lot of nursing homes, a lot of senior care facilities, and I have to tell you, I went in there, and it was the experience of a lifetime, and it gave me hope. They were so caring, so loving, and used everything of the latest interventions to work with Kenny. And I mean, they use the arts and the music, and they meet him on his level where he is at that moment, instead of trying to force him to do something like, you know, he's been saying, you know, that you meet the person at the level they are, where they are, instead of trying to meet your needs, you know, you meet them where they are. But I just wanted to interject that there is hope, that, you know, they're out there. They're finally, memory care centers, I think, is the new, you know, word that they're using, that, you know, things are maybe starting to change. As usual, things are slow, and based on
Funding's
always an issue. But this was a county-run home that, so if you can do it, they had adequate staffing, adequate, training, and that's another thing, educating families. They need to educate themselves. Once they can get past, denying that something might be wrong, they need to really educate themselves. And there's so much out there now about Alzheimer's. I mean, it's on the news. It's not that
And
it's a
autism.
hidden, things like they're not kept upstairs in the back bedroom anymore, but it's out there, fortunately, with our media. So, and with Ron Kaufman, I think maybe you could tell his story a little better there.
Before I do, though, you were talking about the loss of that, the former mom. It was very interesting because I went through the loss of two people after the mom with Alzheimer's died. And it was kind of interesting. That was something that, we had started the book because that chapter 2 was before Mom died, and then that sort of the sequel to that second chapter was Mom's passing, and I talked about my feelings, and I went through the loss of both moms because they're so distinct, so different. So I found that that's something that I wasn't anticipating. So, but as far as Ron, I don't believe in coincidence. It's interesting, thinking back in my career, and I believe that book came out, or the movie, Sunrise, about Ron's life when he was, I believe he was 3. And his parents, and autism was pretty relatively new back in the 70s. And his parents took him all over the country looking for help because he was born with severe autism. And like my experience with Behavior Mod, where so many behavior therapists in my 40-some years in the career of developmental disabilities, there was more behaviors created by sophisticated behavior plans than any resolution. And a part of those philosophies, that power of love with engaging and establishing that positive rapport with a person, I have to give credit to the movie Sunrise. I was, in my 20s, or when I saw the movie on, I believe it was NBC, made for a TV movie about this 3-year-old that his parents, they just gave up on finding a place. So they entered his world. The mom and dad would go in the room and he would perseverate on spinning plates. So his mom would sit down and spin a plate and again enter his world and develop this bond and communication and this bridge between our world and their world. And he was able to gradually come out of his world and enter our world. I highly recommend Ron Kaufman's last book, his new book, Autism Breakthrough, which he talks much about that experience. And then the New York best-selling book Sunrise was also, and it's Sunrise, S-O-N-Rise. But little did I know when I was in my 20s, watching that movie, that 3-year-old would someday write a foreword to our book. And I was interacting with him, I believe, on Facebook. And I sent him that article, that chapter 2 that I used to send out, which I sent to Nancy to ask her if she would like to be my co-author. And he loved it. He fell in love with that article, and because he could relate to it. And we've become pretty good friends, Ron and I. I call him Ron-tastic. He's just a fantastic individual. He went to school, graduated from college, and now they have autism centers, and there's people from all over the world that comes to I think it's Sheffield, Massachusetts, where their global autism center is, and they've helped so many children.
I think it's thinking outside that box again, and not the traditional narrow
Exactly.
approaches with folks, regardless of autism or Alzheimer's or anything really, that you don't get caught in that rut.
That prescription of
Yes, that prescription. This is the way, you know, you do it, like, you know, going into the room and spinning plates with their son. I mean, that was totally verboten. I mean, you did not do
They had
anything.
spray bottles, remember?
Yes.
Water bottles.
Oh, yes. you
on
know,
buses.
Yes.
They had, you know, autism, and this is the profession. And I'm not really putting down professionals.
No, because
Right.
they
they're
dealt
doing-
with what they
they're
had
doing
at that
exactly,
time.
and
yeah.
well intended. Just
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
professionals now in the geriatrics.
Yeah.
They're doing the best that
They-
they know
how
have
to do
with
it.
the training that
Right.
they've had.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for the John Zeisels and the Peter Whitehouse is the author of The Myths of Autism, for bringing an alternative perspective and a way of looking
Right.
at
New ways of looking
yeah.
at things.
And I think that's one of the real values in your book, along with the personal stories too, is that you have that information that people can look for Ron's information for his books and other articles and books and everything, and really become better educated and
Right.
find out more. So
Yeah.
you've got a lot of good resources in the book.
Yeah.
This might be a good time. Go ahead again and tell us how to order the book.
Okay, they can order The Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's by our website, giftsofautismandalzheimers.com, and Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, or Kindle with the Amazon, the electronic book.
And what do you think were your biggest challenges in pulling this book together?
Oh, golly. First of all, just getting the stories from folks, you know, getting the word out there and soliciting those stories and journeys. And with any kind of book, you get promises, oh yes, I'll give you one. And you know, and you wait and it doesn't come, and you come back, and for whatever reason, they either change their mind or they're just not ready at this point in their life to do that. Of course, then you have all the day-to-day or functional type things, you know, getting it, you know, printed, edited, and, you know, and on, and jiggling things back and forth, and
Never goes as smoothly as you think.
it never goes as smoothly. It's not like, oh, just sit down, write this, and, you know, off it'll go. No, I mean, there's a lot of work behind, you know, and I'm very privileged to assist Ken. I mean, he really was the major and the majority person behind the book, and you know, it was quite an experience to do this at this point in my life, you know.
And we're very appreciative
Yeah.
and thankful for all the contributors,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
some wonderful, beautiful
Yeah,
stories.
tell how
empowering.
the book unfolds. It's
Yeah.
not your narrative, or it's not you just citing articles or
Right.
anything. How is the book written? I mean, tell
Okay,
us so
well,
people
you
will know what, when they open the pages, what they're going to find.
Well, of course, this book was a tribute to Ken's mother.
And tell us her name,
Fern.
Yeah.
Fern Routson.
Fern.
Right, and you know, and the stage is set with that, you know, because that's the story and the journey that Ken wanted to tell. And then he wanted to bring in other folks and their journeys, because every individual has a story and a journey, and each one is unique to them. And so then started to gather those with both autism and Alzheimer's and their experiences, and we simply told them, you know, tell us the good and the bad you experienced, you know, lay it on the line for us. And you know, we had a wonderful response, I think.
People from all over the world. I mean,
Yeah.
there's lady from Australia, and then the story that the lady with the 3 kids.
Jenny.
Yep,
Yeah.
and UK. The
Yeah.
people, you know, the lady, in the UK,
Right.
Nancy,
Yeah. And Nancy Getty, and
and
then
Britain,
Paul Isaacs,
from
who
UK,
himself has
autism.
autism, Asperger's syndrome, which is a mild form of autism, and just stories that,
Joe with Alzheimer's in
oh
California.
yeah, the
So
humanity
you
of
actually
it.
had a person
With
Oh, yeah.
Alzheimer's,
With
Joe,
Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it's just, I don't care. I've been, I'm 73 years old, and I'd sit down and I'd read those, and I'd cry. It's still,
very
I know,
inspirational.
no matter how
Very
much I see it,
inspirational.
how much I work with it, the tears could still come,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, okay, good.
Good.
You know,
Yes.
I
Wonderful.
need to do that, yeah.
A wonderful chapter too on the gifts of music from
Yes,
the
yes.
music
Oh,
and the
yes,
art therapists.
yes, oh, yeah. What they had
Very,
seen,
very
experienced, yeah.
enlightening chapter.
Yeah.
You know, from professionals that they're getting this rapport,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of establishing rapport.
Well, I certainly think one of the purest messages I got from this, and my understanding of the gifts, was that probably to me it was the gift of hope you were giving
Yes,
people.
yes, right.
That
Yeah, it's not a
it
dooms.
was that it was
either
not.
diagnosis is
It
not
was
a
not.
dooms, yeah.
Although there may be tears, it's
Right,
not.
tears and
It's not
yeah,
bitterness,
right,
and it's
yeah.
not deep sadness. There's a sense of loss, but there's this.
Of course,
There's
yeah.
a overriding sense of hope and newness.
Life does not end with a
And-
diagnosis of autism or Alzheimer's. There's a whole new world if you allow it, and if you're willing to, be a part and go with them and accept them unconditional.
Yeah.
That's where this love, the power of love,
Yeah.
unconditional, and valuing all life, because everyone has a purpose and something to contribute. There's an excellent chapter here too on the extraordinary gifts of autism. We talked a little bit about dinner, about the guy who flies over Rome and Paris and New York City with autism. He'll go back to a studio and will draw or paint landscape skylines of various cities.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
detailed, and not miss a window. Or people like Leslie that many of the viewers might have seen on 60 Minutes, that was born blind. He also has cerebral palsy, but he can hear any song or symphony or piano concerto and sit down at the piano, even with the CP, cerebral palsy, and flawlessly play it.
A lot of our video games and a lot of our technology are people with Asperger's syndrome. They're amazing what
It's
they
a gift.
have contributed
not a
to
flaw,
this
yeah.
world. No, it's not
It's
a
not
flaw.
flawed genes
It's
with
truly a
Asperger's.
gift what they have contributed to this world.
It
Yeah.
just seems like we're just tapping different
Yes.
parts of our brains.
We
None of-
are.
none
They're
of us
wired
use-
differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
none of us use full capacity of our
No,
brains,
no.
and we all have different areas that we draw from.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's where the
Sure,
gifts.
they're just
that's
wired
where our
differently.
individual
Yeah,
gifts
right,
come
yeah,
from. Is
Definitely.
those things.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big differences, is that we used to see those as deficiencies.
Yes.
Right.
Most
And
people
now
still do.
You're giving
Yeah.
them words
Yes.
like gifts and things,
Yeah.
and that's a
Yeah,
whole
we're trying to change that
mindset.
mindset.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
a change.
It
I mean,
is.
it's just an amazing change in the
Yeah,
outlook
way of
and
looking
in
at
the
things,
view. Words matter.
And that's not to say that this is easy to deal
Mm-hmm.
with for families, and loved ones of these, because no, we're not saying it's easy in any way, shape, or form.
And that there hasn't been that grief and that loss.
Right,
and-
and that loss
You-
and that anguish. Yeah.
You'd be amazed at the people that I've heard from on LinkedIn or Facebook, or actually telephone, from families where they're dealing with a parent with Alzheimer's and they also have a child with autism.
Oh, goodness,
And
Yeah.
in part of my research, I found at least 1,800 people Googling, wanting to know if there were other people out there having the same experiences. 1800, and there's no specific medical test for either Alzheimer's or autism. That's another similarity.
Right.
So it's amazing the growing numbers of precedents.
They can look at characteristics and make a diagnosis from that. But we're talking about families. You had asked me, was there a favorite story? And we have one for me, and I can relate as a mother to this. It was Jenny Guthrie. She has 4 children with disabilities, and in nowhere did she reference any assistance, husband or anyone to help her. These children have autism, range of autism spectrum disorder, and deafness in those 4 children. And through all this, you know, she found gifts, you know, through this sadness and despair she had to have felt. You know, I am sure there's many a night she, you know, fell asleep crying into her pillow, and at times may still. But her strength that she, you know, it amazes me. I'm not sure I could have that kind of strength, that emotional and physical, just to deal with that situation and the day-to-day, to get up every morning, 4 kids with a disability, and put one foot in front of the next, a smile on your face, and go forward. I mean, that's unbelievable strength.
And to raise them.
And to raise them, you know, and she's so proud of each one of their unique accomplishments. And you know, it was just, to me, an amazing story, and I really related to it as a mother, you know, thinking of this, you know, this mother. Yeah.
Well, let's talk, and you're talking about a mother with children with autism and all, and you know, Ken has so eloquently talked about his mother and brought such respect and dignity to her memory, talking right now and in the book and everything. I know we've talked a little bit, and you talked about writing maybe some children's books or things, and something like my grandpa has Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I wrote a little thing.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about my grandpa has Alzheimer's.
Okay, my grandpa has Alzheimer's. Yes, I just sat down when somebody said, "Well, you know, you need to write," because I've written a few other children's stories for my granddaughters that I've not published, but I thought, okay, I'll sit down, and I did that, and used my family's names, my dad's name, and my brother who died as an infant, and my sister. So I put family names in there, and I put it from a like around 9 to 10-year-old perspective, explaining what Alzheimer's is to a child around that age. And this boy, of course, I live on a farm, so the boy lived on a farm. His grandpa lived with them, and that grandpa, the things that, why was my grandpa acting this way? And he said, well, you know, nobody will talk to me about it. Nobody will tell me what's wrong with my grandpa. Is he going to die? You know, and he said, well, I think I'll go to my school nurse. You know, so the school nurse talked to him, and you know, said that, you know, you just be there for your grandpa. You know, he's your best buddy, and you're his best buddy. And it's a very short little story, and I would like to someday get it, you know, out there with some pictures or whatever. But his grandpa is his best buddy, even though his grandpa is now different. You know, but there's still that love and things that are there between them. You know, so help children from little on up.
Have something to look forward to.
Well, we'll see, right, yeah, that starting very young.
When you were writing and putting together this particular book, you've both had so many years dedicated to service to people with disabilities. Was there anything new or surprising that came from any of the stories or from your research or anything? Was there something that said, aha to you, or, you know, or did it touch you in a way that you hadn't expected to be touched?
Probably for me, well, I've always been a very sensitive person and things, so, you know, I think how profound the stories were. I mean, coming from a medical, I've seen these things, and working in the field of disabilities, so the part isn't new, what they told me about, you know, their stories. I think I probably surprised myself that I could still feel their pain, their tragedy, their growth, you know, to the extent that, you know, they're feeling it and things. So, no, I don't think there was any big surprises or anything. Probably surprised myself that I could do something and work with him and you know, put together a book. That was probably one of the biggest surprises.
And I appreciate, by the way, all of your work and bringing this book to fruition,
Well,
too.
and thank you, my dear friend, for inviting me, and for you, Judy, for having us, that we can give this message to folks that
It's good when we can communicate these
yes,
kind of stories.
yes,
and
exactly.
things,
Yeah.
I think for myself, it was learning in my research about neuroplasticity, which is the brain's natural capacity to rewire itself and create new neural circuits. We don't have enough time. It's a whole another show if you want to do it. And the other thing is a book called Autism by Robert Melillo about epigenetics being environmental factors like stress or toxins that turns on some genes and turns off other genes.
Fascinating field, yeah.
It just, when the body says no, another author, MD out of Canada, Gabor Mate, he believes that Alzheimer's is autoimmune disease, like all the other autoimmune, like rheumatoid, which is interesting because my mom had very severe rheumatoid arthritis. All her fingers were crossed, her toes, feet, like that. And I have colon issues, and my mom had colon, that inflammation. So stress, you know, the cortisol, I had no idea of the detrimental effects of stress. But the good news, and like I said, you might want to do a whole show on neuroplasticity because it gives me hope. And I think sometime in the future, there's going to be, they're going to use neuroplasticity to cure Alzheimer's. So, and then with autism, with autism, according to Dr. Melillo, he's got the brain centers all over the world. He has an interesting argument about how, you know, you do not have to have a child with autism, that you can change your genetics. It used to be you thought that you were born with, you know, certain genes and chromosomes, and that was fate and you couldn't do anything about it. But the more I read about epigenetics, you know, if people change their diet and if we as a society would work on some of these environmental toxins, there's hope. So it's the hope that I got out of this.
I think
there's
a lot of research going on and many facets of coming in, and you know, I don't think it's one particular thing myself. I think it's a combination of things working together, and again, fascinating research going on.
Well, I tell you, we've just scratched the surface. Yes, we could. And again, we want to draw attention. The Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's, Stories of Unconditional Love and Self-Determination. And if you wonder what the gifts are, in addition to hope, unconditional love and self-determination. One more time, where do they get the book?
And it's $60. Do you want to tell the cost of the book?
Sure.
Is that important?
Yeah, cost of the book and where can we get it?
$16. Gifts of Autism and Alzheimer's, the website.com, and Amazon.com. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Judy Leasure and the Partners for Community Living for helping us spread the word that a diagnosis of autism and Alzheimer's does not mean the end of the world. That there's life after autism and Alzheimer's.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
You're
As
welcome.
always,
You're welcome. Pleasure,
you're
Judy.
a gem, and
Yes.
Ken, you as well. And
Pleasure.
perhaps we'll have the chance, and if you get more things going with this and all, we'll bring you back and talk more about it or something, or for the second book that comes up or anything. We do want to thank all of you for spending this time with us and hope you were inspired by what you've heard during this program, give us a call at Partners at 898-3655 if you would like more information. If you didn't get all that information written down, we'd be happy to give that to you. Contact us at www.partnersohio.com. We have several things coming up for the fall and winter, some fundraising activities, our community campaign, our Jingle Bucks, and several other things as we get near the end of the year, and certainly always looking for support for our wish list so that we can provide holiday gifts for the people we serve. And we're open to inviting you to be a part of any of that with us and being a partner in making the community a more accepting, open, and accessible place for all of us. And that's no better gift that we could give to each other. Thank you from Partners for Community Living, and we look forward to seeing you again.